I'd like to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, starting with Bob Deeks.
Thanks, Mark. Bob Deeks here. A little bit about my background. I'm the past president of CHBC, also the past chair of National CRC and the Net Zero Council, and I am the co-vice chair for the Step Code Council. We are a high-performance builder renovator operating out of Whistler, British Columbia, and servicing the Sea to Sky corridor. Just a little bit of update. Our business is pretty much business as normal. And we've, I think, implemented some measures that have allowed everybody on our sites to keep safe.
Thanks, Bob. Next, we have Dr. Melanie Ng from the BC Construction Safety Alliance.
Oh, hi, thanks, Mark, and hello, everybody. I am an occupational hygiene researcher. I have a PhD in occupational hygiene, and I work at the BCCSA. My usual focus is on silica exposure, and I manage all the data and the science behind the silica control tool. But infectious disease, viruses, hygiene, that all falls within occupational hygiene. So in the past few weeks, I and my colleagues at the BCCSA, we've had a big focus on coronavirus, COVID-19, and we've developed a lot of resources. So I was hoping to share that with you today.
Thank you, Melanie. And third, we have Cam Knowles from Trillium Projects.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for having me today. So my construction career began in 2005, started as an on-site carpenter. Since then, I went back to BCIT and gained my construction management degree. Since then, currently landed at Trillium Projects, managing several mixed-use and multifamily projects in Metro Vancouver. Also a member of the Joint Operational Safety and Health Committee, which has certainly given me direct access to conversation on site with regards to COVID-19.
Okay, thanks, Cam. The one comment I'm receiving, Cam, is that you're not very loud. So maybe try to get a little closer to the microphone, or maybe speak a little bit louder.
Yeah, sure.
That'd be great. Thanks. So we're delighted that three of you are able to participate in the discussion today and share your knowledge and expertise with our attendees. I think we as an industry need to remember that the provincial government has designated residential construction as an essential service, and that places a great responsibility on each of us to ensure that we're following the proper protocols and ensure that everyone working is safe. Certainly, if you've been watching the daily briefings out of Victoria, you know that the numbers suggest that we've had some success in BC in flattening the curve, but it's important that we stay vigilant if we want to beat this thing and get us back to normal as soon as we can. So let's get started. Actually, I have my first question is what's probably a burning question for a lot of our audience, and so I'm going to direct this one to Melanie. One of the requirements is of a 50-person restriction. So how does the BCCSA interpret that 50 people and in terms of defining what is a site, particularly on a larger multifamily construction site?
Yeah, I mean, it has been a challenge for us too to interpret some of the guidance that we've received as an industry, because some of it has been quite vague. So I don't know if you guys saw, I think it was last week, or maybe even the week before, in the question and answer session in Bonnie Henry's briefing, she was asked about construction and why it was allowed to stay open in this time. And what she said was that and this is true, that construction in general is lower risk than some other industries, because work is often done outside in many cases, not always, but yeah, some of the work is outside. And in those cases, there's airflow, so you don't have to worry about people being all cooped up in one place. And the other reason is because there is usually space on the construction site for people to spread out. So what that kind of says to me is that really what she wants to see is for people to be spreading out as much as possible. So when they say they say that you can have 50, you don't need, you can have more than 50 people on a work site, but they don't want 50 people in one space. So I would interpret that as being maybe a room where you don't have room to spread out. Depending on what the larger construction site is, you could have more than 50 people on the site, as long as they're not in the same airspace, breathing the same air, all bunched up together, if everybody has enough room to spread out. So I would say in one room, you wouldn't want to have more than 50 people.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Melanie. And there is also a very good little bulletin on the BCCSA COVID-19 resources website on the BCCSA website. There's a tremendous amount of information and resources on that website. So I think every one of you who are looking to run your construction sites should bookmark that page. And eventually get around to reading a lot of those bulletins, because there's a lot of very good information in there, specifically even relating to the question that I just asked. So my next question is, I'm going to ask this to Bob first. Just how are your operations going in general? Have you had to slow down or stop any work at your sites? How many sites do you have that are active?
We lost 2 sites in the city. They were shut down. We were doing some reality TV reno show, and camera crews pulled out. Otherwise, we have about 7 sites between Pemberton and Squamish that are active. Luckily, they are all at a phase where we're able to space out the trades and our staff. So we really haven't had to shut any down. We had just finished a project as this all started up. So luckily dodged that one, because of course in a single family custom house, as you're coming to the end, you can have a lot of trades stacked up there. We, I think, really jumped on this early on. We shifted all our admin and PM staff to work remotely. We were already set up with Microsoft Teams. We used Join Me as well. So that was a fairly seamless transition, and all our administrative and project management teams are working off laptops, so that made that transition easy. And it took us about 2 weeks to get some really formal hand washing stations set up at all our sites. We have some that are just in the ground, so the guys got quite creative in setting up some effective hand washing stations there. We got some support from some offshore clients who initially sent us some sanitation products that we were unable to get here, but really leveraged some of the distilleries that have shifted over to producing sanitation products. And so we are now well set up. The team seems to be in good spirits. And I think we've really been successful in setting up a safe work environment, both for our teams and all the trades that are showing up.
Great. So Cam, same question. How are things going at Trillium?
Yeah, things are going actually fairly well. Currently we have 8 projects under construction. We haven't had any shutdowns. We acted very quickly on our policies to make sure we could keep moving forward. Our kind of unofficial motto right now is slow and safe is better than stopped. So we're just maintaining that mentality. The feedback from the site staff and trades have been very good. It seems that, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, maybe a little bit louder, Cam, or maybe get your microphone closer to your mouth.
Yeah, is that better? Like I said, just getting buy-in from the trades and from the site staff has been very important, but slow and safe is better than stopped. Certainly productivity has slowed down a little bit, but no sites have shut down.
Great. So just as a follow-up, what's been the biggest challenge that you guys have had to adjust to? So Cam first.
Yeah, sure. I would definitely say the biggest challenge is just making sure our policies are kept in place. I think one thing that was good is we were very proactive by sending our policies actually to city staff, WorkSafe, to get their feedback. So filling any of the gaps that we currently, or we didn't already have, that was really helpful. But one of the biggest things I'd say maybe a challenge is just educating all the sub trades. I think as soon as we were able to educate them on our policies, we got the buy-in from them, and generally everybody's been very happy.
Great, thanks. How about you, Bob? Biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge early on is we had another number of renovation projects where the water was shut off. And so coming up with effective hand washing stations that everybody could use. And our new COVID-19 compliance officer quickly figured out we could buy camping shower kits. And so they carry about 40 liters of water. And we were able to hang those by the doors of all those sites that didn't have running water initially, and set up, I think, a reasonably effective hand washing station. And we found that we had good buy-in from everybody who showed up. So that got us over that hump. And then we have some new construction sites that, of course, had water just coming out of the ground. And we were able to hook that up with some hands-free washing stations. With that, which has been really well received as well.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. That's a great idea. The camping shower hack, I guess. And Cam, that idea of getting some feedback or sign off on your procedures and site rules from authorities is also a great idea. I don't know, Melanie, is that something that BCCSA could provide as well if people wanted to send their proposed or site policies and regulations to BCCSA? Could someone there have a look at it and comment back?
Well, we have our regional safety advisors, and they are working a lot right now on COVID-19 procedures. We have a hotline so people can phone them and ask. And yeah, they may be able to review your procedures for you. That's definitely something that they might be able to do. But yeah, I encourage. We also have a phone-in session, or actually it's a web panel session every morning at 9, and you can connect to that and ask questions to me and the RSAs there as well. And yeah, we may be able to review some of your procedures. I mean, if it's a huge volume of work, it might be too much for us. But so we really do better with specific questions, but we might be able to review some documents as well.
Yeah, and I have sort of like this one follow-up question. Does the hand washing station have to have hot water?
No, it just has to have running water. Warm water is preferred, but if it's not possible, cold water is okay. Okay, thanks. So I guess sort of a continuation with you, Melanie. What are the main questions that these webinars and that BCCSA in general have been receiving from contractors and the operators of various construction sites? What are the main? Yeah, we've received. Well, we have a FAQ section on our website now with all the questions that we've been getting, and yeah, we have. I mean, most of them have been related to, how do I set up physical distancing on my work site? What if I can't do physical distancing? Is this hand washing station okay? What if we can't get a hand washing station? The other is, I mean, also, what if we can't get PPE? I think it's probably the same kind of things that a lot of you guys have been dealing with.
Yeah, I noticed one of the questions that is quite prominent on your website, on your resources page, is what do I do in those situations where I can't follow the minimum physical distancing requirements of 2 meters? How do you manage that? And I think that's probably something that does come up from time to time on construction sites. Yeah, definitely. That has been a really challenging one, because I think that part of the issue with that is, the mandate has come from the provincial health officer that we should all be doing this physical distancing. And there hasn't been any clarity over what are acceptable exceptions to that. And so as the BC Construction Safety Alliance, we don't really have the authority to tell you when you can or can't breach that physical distancing requirement. And WorkSafe BC, they don't have that authority either. So for us, the best we can tell people is do everything that you can to maintain physical distancing as much as possible. But
in recognizing that that may not always be possible, we have published some suggestions on best practices that you might be able to do if you're not able to do physical distancing.
Okay, thanks, Melanie. Next question to Bob. I think you touched on this earlier, but maybe we'll go into a bit more, dive a little deeper on any what you had to that sort of discussions you've had with either trades or suppliers in terms of compliance. Is everyone on board? Have you had to, read the riot act to anyone?
Everybody's been great. Sometimes I think there's been some reminders to some of the trades to show up to make sure that they wash their hands as they approach. We've designed and created new signage around all our sites specific to the requirements. We put up specific how to wash your hands. And I'd have to say that after all these years, I finally learned how to wash my hands properly. Yeah, good buy-in from everyone. One of the things that we have done, we've reached out to all our suppliers just to double check on what their supply chain looks like. And we have, on most of our sites, we've stocked up on at least a month or so of materials just in case those supply chains went down, particularly from materials coming from the United States.
Great. Cam, any thoughts on that in terms of suppliers and trades?
Yeah, similar to Bob, we've had really good buy-in from everybody. We proactively sent our policies to all the companies that were working on our sites. Again, the challenge was educating everybody about our policies. The main intent certainly is just to create comfort with the workers at our own site, to make them feel that they're in a safe environment. And we want to work with them, not against them, to move forward. I mean, we all have to come together right now to keep the operations running.
Right, great, thanks, Cam. So Cam, also maybe next question for you. Who's in charge of monitoring and making sure everyone complies on your site? And has it been challenging to make sure that they understand all of the responsibilities and all the regulations?
Yeah, that's a good question. Certainly we already had current safety policies that are enforced by our supervising staff, whether it's the superintendent or the CSO. But adding our policies was just a new implementation to the current monitoring or enforcement process. However, we have created a new COVID compliance officer role. Now, this can be either the CSO or a lead hand or one of our supervising staff, and their main scope is just to ensure that the policies are being followed. Reminders to everybody and follow-ups to anybody that may have gone home and felt that they were sick for whatever reason. So it's somewhat of a new scope, but currently fits within our current safety policies.
Thanks. And Bob?
So very similar to Cam, we actually created a new position for COVID-19 compliance officer. So that individual is going around to all the sites, just making sure that their supplies, they have enough supplies, that the setup is done properly, that the signage is in place. So support to the site superintendent, who is directly responsible to enforce, proper distancing, hand washing. We hold 7:45 huddle. That was more of an administrative huddle. We've invited all of our team to join that huddle in the morning just to get a general update. And team huddles that they have before they start work at about 8 o'clock, they have now included COVID-19 best practices into that discussion every morning.
Thanks, Bob. A quick question, Melanie. There's been some, I don't want to say controversy, but differences in interpretation amongst the provincial and the federal health officers about the use of masks. and the effectiveness of it, what type of mask they should be using. So do you recommend that people on construction sites wear masks? If so, what type? Are the types of masks that that workers might normally wear during a construction project where there's a lot of dust around, or are those adequate, or is there a different type of mask they should be wearing?
Yeah, this is definitely a hot topic, and we have received a lot of questions about this for sure. So, so I guess there are two different types of masks that we talk about in these discussions. The first is respirators, and those are the same kinds of ones that we would normally use on a construction site to control exposure to dust. And those are either like the N95s or the half face mask or full face mask with the filters. And really, the virus, it's treated as a particulate. So any kind of mask that would be effective against particles or dust would be effective against the coronavirus. So a type of, what I recommend to people is that they don't use the N95s, because those should really be reserved for healthcare. And I do suggest that if you have any half masks available with P100 filters or P99 filters, those are even more effective than the N95s, and they're not used by healthcare. But that said, I don't suggest that people walk around wearing half mask respirators all the time. That I would only suggest that if you are maybe in one of those situations where you can't maintain physical distancing, or if you're, for example, a first aider who is treating somebody who might have COVID-19, then you might need to wear respiratory protection to protect yourself. Now, the other type of mask that everyone has been discussing is just a face covering of some sort, like a cloth mask. And those are different from respirators in that they don't provide much protection for the person who is wearing the mask. They are not airtight, so wearing that will not protect you. But what that could do is, if you yourself are infected, it could prevent your droplets from dispersing into the air around you. So that is more to protect the people around you. And on construction sites, I know that Bonnie Henry is not recommending that everybody wear these masks. She's recommending it more for people, like if you have somebody on site who is showing symptoms and you've moved them into a first aid, you've isolated them, then they might need to wear a mask to protect the first aider. Really, we shouldn't have anybody on site who has symptoms. But yeah, this is definitely something that that we're watching closely to see if we do get more guidance on the use of cloth masks, to see if they could be something that could be useful in construction. At the moment, I don't think that we have that the kind of go ahead from government to go ahead and start using them on construction sites, but it's something that we're watching closely.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. I think it's one of these topics where it's a challenging thing to make a decision on, because, you know, it being a new virus that we've never seen before, we don't necessarily know 100% how it behaves. You know, there's you know, I keep reading things about how some people can be asymptomatic but could still spread the virus, and in those cases, maybe they could be wearing masks so they don't spread. But, you know, again, you want to make decisions based on science and not sort of what you read on the internet. So I think if we continue to seek advice from Dr. Henry, I think that's probably the best approach. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree. Yeah, I know. I know you're totally right that this is an emerging area and the science is not all in, so we don't know. There is some suggestion that there is transmission from asymptomatic carriers. But yeah, I think in BC, the best we can do is listen to Bonnie Henry. She seems to be doing a good job so far. And what she is saying is that we should be mostly concerned about people who have symptoms, and that we don't need to wear cloth masks if we don't have symptoms.
Okay, thank you. Bob, you touched on this earlier a bit, but again, when we dive deeper into this, questions about the supply chains. I mean, that's one of the concerns, because, you know, all sectors of the economy are affected by this, including production and shipping. So have you had concerns and a lot of sleepless nights about supply chain, and how have you managed that situation?
No sleepless nights. as I noted earlier, and I think Cam agreed, that we've reached out to our suppliers to make sure that the supply chain was still open. We haven't had anybody suggest to us that they would be unable to supply. I think from what's going on in the United States and the situation, my perception is the situation down there is going to get a lot worse. We have looked at anything that we need to order from there and have pre-ordered as much as we can. If I look out my window, I have a massive stock of insulated concrete form sitting in our yard here for a big project that we're doing. So I think the guys are well taken care of for about 2 months. There is some suggestion. I think Interfor was has closed one of their mills. So, wood product supplies may be a concern as we move forward. So again, working with our primary supplier for wood products, we're pre-ordering as much as we can right now. But generally, I think we're in pretty good shape for the next 60 days.
And when you pre-order with your suppliers, are they giving you any sort of a heads up about, okay, I've got enough to meet your order right now, but there's questions about what might happen in a month or so?
We haven't had any feedback from that. I mean, one of our ICF suppliers, rather than delivering the full load up front, delivered about a third of it, and then tried to assure us that there was adequate supply and they would shuttle it up to us as needed. I'm not entirely too sure where that was coming from. We just responded back, no, we want the full order now. We don't want to be put in a position of risk where we would run out. So we ordered. We want 100% of the order delivered now, and I think that's my advice to everybody is, while we want to stay away from hoarding materials, I don't think it's unreasonable to have sort of 60 days worth of material on site.
Ken, you guys have larger sites. Have you had any concerns or any issues with the supply chain?
Yeah, certainly it's going to be dependent on what stage your project is at. More recently, we've had some issues with finishing materials, but what's been positive there is, we're trying to be proactive, keep in touch with our suppliers if there has been any issues, and there have been a few. We work with them to find possible alternates. Getting the design team involved, trying to make quick decisions is, the most important thing there. Other things that may be impacted, like Bob was saying, stuff that's coming out of the States, steel, stuff like that. So it's certainly going to depend on where you're at in your project, but just being proactive and try to procure as much as you can right now.
Thanks, Cam. And Melanie, is there advice on your website or any advice you want to provide now specifically for suppliers making deliveries? There's I think I've heard that the virus can survives on harder surfaces longer. So things like appliances being delivered, or windows or glass or mirrors, those type of things. Is there some precautions that suppliers delivering should take, and then the people who are working with those deliveries after they're on site should be taking?
Yeah, so we, on our website right now, we don't have any guidance on deliveries, but that is something that we're actually just putting together right now. So we are updating our website all the time with new resources. So in the next few days, I think that we are going to have something about receiving deliveries. And yes, certainly the virus can survive on hard surfaces for up to 3 days, maybe more. And over that time, it is declining over that time. So on the third day, there wouldn't be as much active virus remaining as there was on the first day. So, but you do still need to take precautions. So what I would suggest is, try to maintain distance from between the person receiving the delivery and the person doing the delivery. Maintain the distance. Try and maybe text to say that the delivery has arrived rather than signing for it in person. Be careful if you do have to do signatures with exchanging paper and pens and that sort of thing. Make sure that if you can sanitize it, or certainly wash your hands immediately after doing that kind of thing. And then I would also suggest cleaning the surface of the material as soon as you can upon receipt with disinfectant.
Great, thanks very much. Now, I want to ask Cam this next question first. Dealing with the project timeline, obviously, as you say, slow and safe is better than shut down. But what about the impacts that slow might have? Particularly with deadlines. Maybe for Bob, this will be a more important point in terms of your dealing with clients. And maybe Bob, maybe some suggestions for renovations as well, and dealing with clients letting people into their houses. So, but timelines and client relations and scheduling, how are those challenges being dealt with?
Yeah, this situation is changing and evolving, which determines the schedule. So currently we're communicating on a weekly basis our schedule to the owners. And, we don't really know how much the project's going to be delayed overall until this is over. It's certainly difficult to project the finish line. So, again, just being understanding with sub-trades. So far, everybody's been really positive and on board with trying not to impact the schedule, but again, trying to maintain all of the safety policies. And then just with regards to, finishing homes and our customer care team, we do have one project that just got occupancy. So what we're doing now is just postponing any non-emergency work, but we have actually developed a customer care and homeowner safety policy in the event that we do need to do any emergency work.
Thanks, Cam. Bob?
I think communication is key. Right now, based on where our projects are at, we're not seeing any real slowdown. We do have a policy in place now where we would only allow one trade in the project at a time. So on a couple of renovations, our staff have actually vacated to allow the trade to come in. All our clients are very understanding of this. I've been doing a video update to my team and to all our clients once a week, and sending them that out to everyone. I have had very, very positive response from our clients around that transparent communication style. We also have a platform where our clients can go online and see the progress on their sites, and so posting photos and comments from the team every day, I think, helps assure people that the work is ongoing, and that we are taking the precautions to keep everybody safe. And again, everybody's been very, very considerate of, slow and steady is better than getting shut down.
Great. Thanks, Bob. I want to ask a question now, and maybe I'll start with you, Bob, about WorkSafe. Have you been visited by WorkSafe to do any site inspections? How are they approaching sort of the monitoring and compliance of the provincial health officers' regulations?
So we haven't seen anybody from WorkSafe up here. We rarely do, unfortunately. The communication that I do understand is that WorkSafe right now is unable to enforce proper social distancing and hygiene practices. They can provide advice, but at this time they can't fine you or shut you down if they deem that you are non-compliant. I think that they are, they can be a very important resource for everyone, just to get some feedback on whether you're doing enough to keep everybody safe.
Cam, same question.
Yeah, we've certainly had WorkSafe and bylaw come by our sites. Again, just checking that the policies that the government has put in place are being followed. Us proactively sending our policies to them was very helpful. Again, trying to fill those gaps. Any feedback that they have has been positive. And but yeah, they certainly have been doing site visits and providing feedback where needed.
And Melanie, have you had communications or discussions with WorkSafe and or bylaw officers in terms of monitoring, inspections, compliance, enforcement?
Yeah, we have not had any communications with bylaw officers. I guess just because we don't have really pre-existing relationships with them, and there are so many municipalities throughout the province. But we certainly have been in touch with WorkSafe BC. They have been reviewing all of the information that we've been putting out and providing us with feedback. So that is very helpful. I mean, I think that the challenge that WorkSafe BC are having is that these orders are coming from the provincial health officer. They're not coming from them. So I think that they have some of the same challenges that we do in knowing how to interpret this in a workplace environment.
Great, thanks. So we got 15 minutes left, so we're going to go to some questions from our audience. And the first question has to do with inspections. Have the builders experienced any issues with municipal inspectors completing their required tasks? And so let's start with Bob.
It's a bit of a mixed bag. Some of the municipalities are still out there doing physical inspections. Whistler right now is doing video conferencing for inspections. We have shifted to video conferencing for our engineering inspections as well. So we haven't seen any slowdown as a result of that. I think everybody's kind of learning how to get around in a safe way, whether it's through social distancing. The SLRD requires separation of 100 feet between the inspector and anybody on site. So we actually just shut the site down for half a day to allow him access to go on there and feel safe. And the RMW is doing video conferencing. I'm actually not too sure what Squamish is doing right now because we don't have a project in there that is at a stage that needs inspections.
Cam?
Yeah, I think every municipality is going to do it a little bit differently. Certainly, they're looking for possible alternate inspection methods, pictures or videos. At the same time, I think they're becoming a little bit more reliant on consultant reviews. Again, each consultant is doing field reviews a little bit differently. We certainly have a lot of consultants that are still coming to site and doing their as per typical field reviews. But certainly we try to give a little bit more lead time for inspections nowadays.
Okay, let's see. We've got so many questions. There's a interesting question for Cam. Primarily, I guess, because it sounds like a larger site question. Do you recommend having directional stairwells? I assume that means one way up and one way down.
I do recommend it, and it is actually part of our policy right now. So as an example, the west side of the building would be up and the east side would be down. One of the challenges is certainly going to be corridors. So it's very difficult to create, one corridor going east or west. What we're finding is if you're walking down a corridor and you see another worker coming towards you, we're finding that a lot of workers are just maybe going into a unit and allowing another person to pass, or maybe even turning and going the other way and trying to make your way around. So it is certainly challenging, but we're learning as we go, I think, a little bit on that.
Okay, that's great. There's a question, and I think maybe Melanie can probably take this one as well. If a worker has a family member at home who is suspected of having COVID-19, should that worker be coming to the site, or should they be isolating at home?
Yeah. So if you have a family member at home who has symptoms of COVID-19, then yes, I think that you should be isolating at home for the 14 days. 14 days. That's the we actually have a health screening tool on our website that shows what questions to ask workers or anybody really before they come on site, and in which scenarios you would need to self-isolate. And in that situation, if you live with someone who's showing symptoms, then you should be self-isolating.
Thank you. A question for Cam and Bob. It's one thing to physically be separated during the work that you're doing, but what about during breaks and during lunch? Do you also enforce a separation then as well? And if you have, say, for example, a lunchroom, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so I think typically we don't really allow a lot of eating on site just because it does create quite a bit of garbage, but we're being a little bit more lenient in that case, allowing workers to eat in the parkade so that they don't have to be in close quarters to eat lunch. As the weather's getting nicer here, it's a little bit easier for guys to go off site. But if they do want to eat on site, we're not providing necessarily a lunchroom, but just allowing more space for everybody to kind of separate and eat and have a coffee break.
And we certainly allow people to eat lunch on site. We just ask that they maintain proper social distancing in the same way that they are during their doing their work.
Okay, let's see, what would be another question? Okay, here's a one. It's almost a legal question for the builders. How are you addressing the issues with 45 and 55-day deadlines for lien claim and release of holdback per Builders Lien Act being suspended by provincial health? Subtrades can potentially submit a claim a year after a project is being substantially completed. What measures can the owner take to protect their property from lien claims?
I'm not aware of any changes to the lien or the Builders Lien Act because of COVID, so I can't really answer that. I'd have to look into that a little bit more.
I'm in the same boat as Cam.
Okay, so maybe that's something, Wendy, that maybe we can take to some of a legal expert, and maybe we can post that response onto our resources page in a couple of days once we can get a handle on that. So whoever asked that question, and for any of those our listeners who are interested in that topic, keep an eye on our COVID-19 resources page. So here's a question that's maybe a bit concerning because I guess not everyone is as good and as compliant as Cam and Bob. This question, as a subtrade, we are seeing very little adjustments on site so far. Typically some extra hand washing or disinfecting gel dispensers. Working and walking in hallways seems to be the main issue on multiple multi-unit sites. Any suggestions for a subtrade to get compliance from a builder?
I would simply say that if you don't feel safe, then you decline to perform any work on the site.
Yeah, I'd agree with Bob. It's possible that maybe that site doesn't know or have the proper policies in place, and if whoever is asking this question can find the resources and maybe provide it to them, that may help. But if they're not willing to do that, then yeah, I wouldn't be working on site.
Okay. Another question. Well, actually, Melanie, do you want to chime in on that question?
Yeah, I just agree with Cam and Bob, basically.
Okay. Here's a question about, I guess, flexibility of staffing. Are there sites that had to stagger their shifts to accommodate either the 50-person limit or maybe, Bob, you mentioned about subtrades having exclusive access to the site when they're working. So I guess the question is about being flexible with your staffing and scheduling.
I can go first. We have offered flexible work schedules and working on the weekend if people want to catch up as a result of slowing the pace of work down on site to really enforce social distancing, particularly with different trades. Right now, none of our projects are really being impacted schedule-wise, so that's something that we may need to lean on as we move forward here a little bit. But certainly want to be flexible with everybody. For example, we had a bit of a conflict on a site on Monday, and so the guys took Monday off, and they're going to work on the Friday, which is the holiday instead.
Yeah, I agree with Bob. It's being flexible with everybody right now, just trying to work together. Actually, one interesting fact is City of Coquitlam has relaxed their noise bylaws a little bit, allowing some construction to work a little bit later, just allowing to try to maintain this similar schedule, but certainly a little bit slower.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Melanie, do you have a?
Oh yeah, I was just going to say that I think that the message that we're trying to get across is that the physical distancing is really important, and if shift staggering is one way to help you achieve that, then it certainly is a good idea.
Next question, I guess, is I guess people are having trouble accessing and sourcing sanitizer. How do you maintain site cleanliness when you can't find sanitizer? Are there any, I guess, suggestions as to where to source it? Can you buy it in bulk? What do you do when I guess one of the questions, I guess, was also, Bob, where do you get your sanitizer from?
We're getting sanitizer from a distillery in Squamish called Gillespie's. There's also a small distillery here in Whistler that is now producing sanitizer. So I think a lot of the distilleries have quickly shifted gears, and so I would just look up to see who is producing vodka and gin in your local area and connect with them to see if they've shifted over. So we have high proof vodka sanitizer right now.
Yeah, we've still been able to find sanitizer. It does come at a premium. We've been getting it from our safety supplier for any of our safety equipment, but you're paying a premium right now. In addition to that, we've hired janitorial services to come and do disinfecting around the site. So that minimizes the use a little bit. And I think having the hot water hand wash stations, which is more effective than sanitizer, helps a lot. And
Great. Oh, sorry, Bob.
We also have created our own sanitizer using bleach, recognizing that we have to replace it every day because I guess the effectiveness of the bleach degrades after 24 hours. So the guys mix up spray bottles every morning to sanitize all the surfaces and then replenish it each day.
Great, thanks. I have one last question for you. So what about the future? There's been some places where I'm thinking about Kovach, where they were originally allowing residential construction as an essential service, but then I guess as their outbreak escalated, they shut it down to only allow emergency and safety related construction to continue. Are there any thoughts about how long we're going to be able to continue to work? And does this sort of change the way that our industry operates in the future?
Well, I think to answer your question, sorry, to answer your question about will we be able to continue to work? I think if we maintain and continue the policies that BCCSA and the government has put together and come together as an industry, we certainly should be able to continue working in a safe manner.
Yeah, and I just reinforce that, and it's not that challenging to make sure that the people who are on your work site are safe. I think we really need to avoid a perception that our industry is not being safe, so that there's no political pressure to shut us down because we're putting people at risk. Certainly, the last 4 days would suggest that we, as a province, seem to be moving in the right direction. So I think the risk of getting shut down is being reduced, but also clearly understand that, you know, within 2 or 3 days, we could see the numbers go back up. So I just really encourage everyone to do everything they can. Keep the people who are on your site safe. It's not that challenging. It doesn't cost that much money.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that this is definitely, you know, depending on how things go, we are moving in the right direction right now. But I think this is something that that the industry will be dealing with for months to come. So I think that getting all the right policies in now and doing all the right things will give you the best chance of staying open.
Great, thanks very much. So unfortunately, that's all the time that we have for questions. I apologize again for not being able to get to all the questions. There are a lot of very good questions still on the list. And I want to thank everyone who tuned in to the webinars. Apparently between 450 people or so tuned in today. So thanks very much for participating, and especially want to thank Bob Deeks, Dr. Melanie Ng, and Cam Knowles for sharing all that great advice and expertise today. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sending an email probably tomorrow to all the participants with the link to the recording of this webinar, and we encourage you to share it with anyone who could not attend today and who you feel would benefit from this webinar. Also, we'll be putting it on our COVID-19 resources page and also on our eLearn page. Our next 2 webinars, next Wednesday, April 15th, Strategies to Help Your Business Survive COVID-19 with Keith Lloyd, the Business Surgeon Consultancy. And then Tuesday, April 21st, COVID-19 Housing Market Impacts and Recovery with Brendan Ogmanson, who is the Chief Economist of the BC Real Estate Association. So we continue to offer these webinars at no cost, but please pre-register, on our website. Also, we'd be very interested to hear what topics you'd like to see covered in the future in this series, and send your suggestions to Wendy at havan.ca. So again, thanks to our participants. Thanks to all of you for attending, and we'll see you next week. And everyone, stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.